Good haircuts are boring. I first threw that line out there when I was speaking on a panel at a conference about social media for hairstylists. I wasn't really thinking much when I said it, it just kind of came out. And somebody after the conference came up and said, "Hey, that was brilliant. I love what you said there." What I meant when I said it originally was, so we were talking about social media and trying to teach hairstylists how to get more out of their Instagram, essentially. And what I was making reference to is the fact that most people who are on social media looking for hair stuff, they don't just want to see pictures of hair. And I think a lot of hairstylists and barbers tend to just post pictures of hair. And what happens is there's so many people out there who are so good at hair that if you're just posting hair, do you know what hair becomes? Boring. And so when we look at a lot of these like big time Instagrammers who are barbers and stylists, they're not just posting hair. They're posting stories and behind the scenes and reviews and opinions and education, and even some drama attracts a crowd, right? And so in the sense of trying to build an Instagram following for your hair business, you can't just post haircuts because haircuts are boring. And then if your plan is like, you know what, I'm not just gonna post haircuts, I'm gonna post good haircuts. Now you're working even harder at being boring. And so that's essentially how I meant it the first time I said it. But once I started posting this online, because I kind of liked it and I made it a hashtag, like good haircuts are boring, like it was kind of sticky. People who found it and adopted it and started using the hashtag and starting throwing the term around were these like really, really creative, weird hairstylists and barbers who were doing crazy haircuts, really like super creative cuts. And today, if you look at the hashtag good haircuts are boring, you'll find like over 1,000 haircuts that have crooked lines and jagged edges and really dirty finishes and like deliberate bald patches here and there. And so that's kind of what the hashtag came to evolve to be. And so if good haircuts are boring, does that mean necessarily that bad haircuts are interesting or bad haircuts are fun? Not necessarily. I mean, if you want to look at it really bluntly and with like nerd glasses on and not kind of feel what the vibe is about, sure, maybe, okay, bad haircuts are fun. But no, like, let me talk about what really is fun here. So there's a bad haircut in the sense of I intended to do this and I messed up and I did this instead. That's a bad haircut. You try to cut a line here and you cut it here by accident, that's a bad haircut. So that's like the obvious bad haircut is you just don't hit the mark. You don't do what you intended to do. But that's not what these people are posting with this hashtag. It's not like that. They're very intentional in what they're doing. And so in another sense, a bad haircut is just a haircut that's not standard, a haircut that's not common, a haircut that's not traditional, a haircut that's not the norm, a haircut that is not easily digestible, a haircut that you have to sit and think about for a minute, one that stops you in your tracks and you go, wow, that's different. And then you feel some kind of way about it. You get an emotion. It's crazy to me how offended people get when they look at some of these haircuts. You know, they can't help but go out of their way and comment like thumbs down and this is horrible. And so it's really fun to me, actually, the fact that a haircut, something that, you know, you will see on your screen and it's not on your head, nobody forced you to get it, but you could be so offended that you'll like leave a negative comment about it. And so that aspect of this whole thing, being able to kind of look at the rules, because none of these people are doing this by accident. They're looking at the rules of what a good haircut is, and they're just laughing at it and going, okay, those are your rules. I'm gonna go do what I wanna do. And to me, that level of fearless creativity is so inspiring and so fun. Like it's a realm that I love to work in, and those are the kind of people I like to be around. Granted, some of this work is deliberately aimed to offend people and get a reaction out of them, but some of it is very tastefully slightly different and maybe not necessarily intended to be so crazy and offensive, but more or less just kind of poke at the status quo and say, hey, maybe we could do it a little different this way. I mean, so many haircuts that are just huge and popular and easy to digest now weren't when they came about. I mean, in 2005, if you had long hair on top, slicked back with like tight sides, you look like George McFly. It was not cool back then. And then it became cool, but at one point it was not palatable. And although we claim that it's timeless, like very, very few of you, I would say like less than 1% of you had a pompadour in 2004. I had one. Anyways, then on top of these sort of general definitions of good haircut, bad haircut, whether you missed the mark or whether you would deliberately intended to break some rules, there's also going to be some personal aspect to all of it. You know, you could have your own ideas of what makes a good haircut or a bad haircut, and it's very personal and what's the word, subjective. So there's obviously going to be that there. Like, I personally think that if you do a technically flawless and immaculate fade and you spend all the time in the world to just perfect that fade, but in order for you to perfect that fade, you had to go up over the corners a little bit and you messed up the shape of the haircut, and so the cowlick sticks out a little here because you went up too high in the crown, but the blend is perfect and flawless, I think that's a bad haircut. If the top doesn't lay nicely or style somewhat easily, I think that's a bad haircut. But that's just me personally. Even if, especially if the fade is perfect and flawless and immaculate, but the top doesn't have any shape, it's like, dude, you just compromised the integrity of the entire look to emphasize the fade. That's a bad haircut, if you ask me. So going back to deliberately breaking certain rules, I did a haircut a few years ago, and let me talk about the history of this haircut real quick here. So this guy, Anthony, reached out to me on Instagram, and he is a very bold, loud kind of personality. He's such a cool guy. He's just has this energy that's like larger than life, and he's just weird, for lack of a better term, and I say that in the most loving way. He does not do things the way normal people do things. He is like a unicorn. But anyways, he reached out to me and he goes, hey, I see that you do these like real messy haircuts. I want you to give me a bad haircut, essentially. Maybe he didn't literally use those words, but we were talking back and forth about how he wanted his hair. And then he actually flew to California from New York to get a haircut. And he was telling me that every time he would go get a haircut, the barber or the stylist would like polish it too much, and it would look like he sat down and got a nice haircut. And he goes, I don't want that. I want it to look raw. I want it to look like broken. I want it to look almost like I did it myself, but I also want it to be cohesive and have some balance and stuff to it. And so we talked, and we had this like cool, different, out there kind of consultation about his hair. And at the same time, we talked about the usual consultation things. How often do you want to have to get it cut? How much time do you want to put into styling it? That sort of thing. And at the end, we ended up landing on this haircut that every time I post this cut, I get people who freaking love it, and they're messaging me saying, how do I ask my barber for this? And then I get people who hate it. Like bad haircut repost pages repost this haircut. Strangers go out of their way to comment on my Instagram to tell me how bad it is, as though I accidentally didn't blend it. This haircut for me was so much fun to do because I had license. I had a client who was excited to break the rules, and he said, I want you to break the rules for me and with a purpose. And so we had a mark, we aimed for that mark, and I hit that mark precisely. So it was not a bad haircut in the sense of I didn't mean to leave that step there, that crooked, jagged line in the back. It was not a bad haircut by any means in that sense. It was exactly the haircut that I envisioned and wanted, but to so many people it is a bad haircut because it's not traditional, it's not normal, it's not palatable. And now I don't consider myself to be like an artist. I'm not really a deep thinker when it comes to much of this. I mean, maybe I am, I don't know. But to me, the hairstyle we ended up landing on, one thing I love about it is it follows most of the rules of a traditional haircut. The hair's very long, where normally hair would be very long. The hair is kind of long, where hair would normally be kind of long. And the hair tapers down to very short, right about where hair would normally taper down to very short. And so all those rules are there, and they're adhered to, and there's balance. In fact, even when I styled it, I pulled a bunch of weight to one side, and I tried to balance it out by making one of the lines crooked the other way. And I wanted to have all the coloring and the textures of the hair be present that are typically in a normal haircut, but I wanted them connected and fitted together in a very unconventional way. And so the lines between the very long hair and the medium hair, and then between the medium hair and the short hair, while they look like I just went in there blindfolded with a clipper and started bashing, I did it all with scissors. I didn't touch this head with clippers, and I very deliberately put in crooked lines in these places, and it was so much fun for me to do it. Point being, though, I heard a line somewhere, I don't know who said this quote, or I'm going to paraphrase it and get it wrong, but somebody said if you're going to break rules, like break one at a time. And to me, this haircut broke one rule. Like there's no, it's not finished. Like all the stuff is roughly, loosely there in roughly the right places, but it's not fitted together cleanly. And so that was fun for me to do. I felt like an artist afterward. But the point is, the reason I want to talk about all of this is for some freaking reason, when it comes to hair, if there's some level of creativity bridging the gap between common and uncommon, So many barbers and hairdressers, and even normal people, average people who are viewing the haircut, have such a hard time looking past a broken rule to look at the entirety of the composition. When it comes to like art, like regular art of almost any kind, we can look past these rules. If a photo is a little bit out of focus, it can still be a powerful photo. If I take and I scribble on a paper and I say, hey, this scribble, that's a face, most people can look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a face. You know, that's an art face. It doesn't look like a photo of a face, it's art, it's a scribble. And we get that and we're okay with that. But as soon as I take a haircut, as soon as somebody takes a haircut and they shave a piece where it's not originally and normally commonly shaved, or they put a finish on it that you wouldn't normally expect to see on that type of haircut, or they bend or break one of these little rules in some little way, people lose their heads. They go, oh my gosh, well that's a bad haircut. That's a bad haircut. And then on top of it, so many of these people who lose their heads over this have the nerve to call themselves artists. I'm a hair artist, but I only do traditional haircuts the proper way. Doesn't sound like much art to me. So the takeaway here, the reason I want to sit here and rant about weird haircuts, about good haircuts being boring, I want you to walk away and think about some things, like really just stop and think. What makes a good haircut good? Like sit down and define it. What makes a bad haircut bad? Sit down and define it in all the different ways you can. Even more so, if you come up with a definition for any of those that doesn't match the common standard tradition, which rules are you willing to break in order to fulfill your own definition of a good haircut or bad haircut versus sticking to the common traditional definition? Are you willing to break those rules? If you were to find out that there is a good percentage of clients out there who want broken rules, there's a good percentage of hairdressers and barbers out there who want to take inspiration off of somebody who is courageous enough to break the rules. Knowing this, would you look at something that you think is bad and maybe consider reassessing what you consider to be good or bad? If enough people like something that you don't like, would you consider sitting back and going, what is there to like about this? Let me see if I can see through the scribbles to see the face. Let me see if I can see through the imperfections to see what the artist was intending to do with this piece. And I will admit, as I'm saying that, I hope some of you were thinking back to my own personal definition of a bad haircut being a tape on top. I will admit, when I see that, I no longer cringe like I used to, because after enough time I started realizing there are people out there who, to them, this is a perfect haircut. There's got to be something to it. Even if I don't see it and appreciate it and understand it up front, you cannot deny that it's getting an emotional response out of people, good or bad. There's got to be something to it. And so I will admit that what I consider personally to be a bad haircut, I really honestly don't even think is a bad haircut. It's just a haircut that I wouldn't want on myself. Anyways, so I hope you had fun thinking and talking and chatting with me here. If you liked it, please subscribe and like and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching.